interesting, like superficially interesting, how uh the modern world is still using Egyptian like symbols. Like for example, like the pyramids, like in an obelisk, you have a tiny pyramid at the top. I don't know if you knew that. It's a so you have the thing here, and you have a tiny pyramid right there, right? Kim, you brought up the U.S. dollar. You have that incomplete pyramid at the end of the eye, seeing eye of God, supposedly, which we know that's not actually the living God in there. Um, by the way, in Egypt, which is I don't know if you've heard this biblical theme in the Bible, like theologians, like the reason why Egypt is mentioned in Scripture, there's a lot of symbolism in that. So there are two major things. So if you see the kind of the map, there's Egypt, there's in the middle, there's Israel, and then to the east of them is Babylon. So those three or those two, at least those two forms of religion are very prominent in Scripture. So here's interesting, like what you have is you have uh, Jesus comes out of Egypt, or Joseph comes out of Egypt, right, into the land of Palestine. But then there's Babylon who comes over and takes them captive into their they were like they were made slaves in Egypt. God delivers them out of Egypt, right? Puts them into their own land. They apostatize, and then Babylon comes over and takes them out and brings them to their land. Then eventually God allows them to come out of Babylon to set up this thing. So in all of that mixing that happens, the religion itself changes. You know, even the Judaism does not remain a pure religion, and that's even a more interesting thing that we can discuss deeper. But Egyptology has always been a part, even when they were free from Egypt, has always been a part of like their DNA somehow. It kind of like got in there, right? So, the worship of the golden calf and all that was not a coincidence. That was just part of a legacy that they had come into from a legacy from Egypt. The worship of these idols. But look at what's going on, like with the modern world. I even think of like even like religions such as like it's in Mormonism, right? The Book of Mormon so claims to have been translated from Reform Egyptian. Why Reform Egyptian? Why not, some other? Why couldn't you have used Hebrew or something like that, right? I think that's addressed, but it's interesting. Why is it Egyptian? There's no such thing as Reform Egyptian, but for one. But I find it interesting that they appeal to Egypt, right, as a reason, as a validation, as a valid reason for as to why these supposedly golden plates were legitimate. So I find Egyptology all over uh, the forms of religion, that are supposedly claimed to worship God. It's in tiny little bits in there now, and I want to say this. So Egypt in theology, right, represents what they call is the world. Like it's the pagan world that doesn't uh, worship, doesn't have a they just believe in secularism. It's just world. It's all about if you remember, Egypt was all about uh, building and work and all this stuff, right? So there was no the concept of Sabbath didn't exist in Egypt, right? So it was all about just let's get on there and the sun worship and all this stuff. That's as opposed to Babylon, which Babylon had a system, but the system of religion of worship that they had is actually false. It's not. So they have. So whereas Egypt was kind of more secular, Babylon is religious, but but the religion of Babylon is not the true religion, which is interesting. So if you remember, Nebuchadnezzar recognized the God of heaven as a true God, but then he decided to, okay, well, you gotta worship me or whatever. Like he made the religion like something out of his own. So he created a false system of religion. So interestingly, the Judaism that comes out of Babylon is the Judaism that Jesus comes in contract in clash with. So obviously they come out of Babylon, and then Jesus comes into this Judaism or this religion with the new temple, which is the second temple. It was not Solomon's temple. And he comes in, and the Judaism they had already been corrupted from Babylon. So he had to come in, and when he came in and exposed the law of God, like they rejected it because it wasn't quite what they had, learned what it was. So I find it interesting. So the mix of the Judaism that Jesus came in had already been corrupted over the years, but especially had the Babylonian influence in there. And a lot of the things that why it clashed, a lot of things that why they couldn't accept Jesus as the Messiah is because they already had the preconceived ideas of false religion already in it. So even though you had supposedly the true religion, quote unquote, around where Jesus showed up, they had already been corrupted with false influences and false religion in there from Babylon. So again, also was something you brought up that made me think that I hadn't thought about before, with this Washington Monument set up in the as a basically as a monument to the gods, right? To a false god. In Revelation 13, we see that a beast comes out of the earth and sets up an image to the beast, to the first beast.
No.
Okay, it's an image to the first beast, which already had these things. So we talk about Roman, Roman pantheon and all these things that are already. So this second beast has all the architecture, all this stuff, right, that they borrowed from Rome, and putting it right in the capital, right, in the new nation's capital, and you have this thing, this image. So I wonder, like in a way, like is this kind of like a hint as to saying, oh, so we have Rome that has that already. We already know who that is, that the old beast. But then you have the new beast over here who's erecting the same and giving homage to the first beast. Through these things, through these Egyptian things. So anyway, it's interesting. Like I'm not an expert in Egyptology or whatever, but I find it very, very interesting. It's now that you brought this up, Kim, something that I probably should look into more.